No one noticed the silence at first. That's the unsettling truth investigators would come to repeat years later, that disappearances rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, tucked inside ordinary moments, disguised as routine plans and casual goodbyes. On the morning Ethan Rowe and Maya Collins vanished, there was nothing dramatic about it. No argument. No warning. No sense of finality. Just two bikes, a shared backpack, and a decision to take the long way around Lake Tahoe. If you're coming across this channel for the first time and you're drawn to real stories that don't have easy answers, stories that unfold slowly and leave you questioning everything, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our next story. Now let's begin from the very day everything started. Ethan was 32, the kind of man who preferred movement over stillness. He'd grown up racing bikes through suburban streets, eventually trading city pavement for forest trails and mountain paths. Maya, 28, matched him stride for stride, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. They'd met 4 years earlier at a bike repair shop in Sacramento, bonded over stripped gears and late-night rides, and built a relationship shaped by motion. They weren't reckless. That part mattered later. Friends would say it again and again. They planned everything. On that early September morning, the air near the lake was cool but clear. Summer crowds had thinned, leaving Tahoe in its quieter phase, the season locals preferred. Ethan and Maya were staying in a modest rental cabin on the western side of the lake, close enough to trails but far from tourist noise. Their plan was simple, a full-day ride looping through lesser-known paths, skirting forest roads, and reconnecting near sunset. They packed light, water, protein bars, a small first-aid kit. Ethan checked his phone one last time, sent a message to his brother. Back before dark. That was the last confirmed message anyone ever received from him. Around noon, a hiker later recalled seeing a couple matching their description near a gravel access road that veered away from the main trail system. Two bikes, one black, one unmistakably red, leaned briefly against a tree as the couple checked a map. The witness didn't think much of it at the time. Why would he? By nightfall, concern began to surface. When Ethan and Maya hadn't returned by 9 p.m., their close friend Lena Ortiz, who was staying nearby, tried calling. No answer. At first, she assumed the ride had taken longer than expected. Tahoe trails had a way of stretching time. But when midnight came and went, unease set in. Their bikes were valuable. Their route was familiar. And neither Ethan nor Maya had ever gone off-grid without telling someone. By dawn, the silence felt louder. The missing persons report was filed within hours. Search teams moved fast, faster than many cases would allow. Volunteers, rangers, and deputies combed the trails they were known to frequent. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned forest clearings and ravines. The assumption, at least initially, leaned toward an accident. A fall. A hidden injury. Something survivable, if found in time. But as hours became days, the terrain offered nothing. No blood. No torn clothing. No dropped equipment. And most unsettling of all, no bikes. Searchers widened the radius, checking water access points along the lake, though neither Ethan nor Maya had planned to ride near steep shorelines. Dive teams found nothing. Rangers inspected ravines and steep descents. Still nothing. After 2 weeks, optimism began to erode. Friends plastered flyers across towns surrounding Tahoe. Social media lit up with photos of the couple smiling beside their bikes, captions pleading for information. Tips poured in, some promising, most useless. A red bike seen near a campground. A couple resembling them at a gas station. Each lead collapsed under scrutiny. Months passed. Winter arrived, burying trails under snow and forcing the official search to slow, then stop. Investigators kept the case open but inactive, filed under missing, presumed lost in wilderness. It was a quiet classification, one that offered little comfort to those left behind. Maya's mother refused to accept it. Ethan's brother drove up to Tahoe every spring, walking sections of trail by himself, convinced something had been missed. Years went by. Life, cruelly, continued. By the 5th year, the case had faded into obscurity. New deputies barely recognized the names. Flyers peeled from old bulletin boards. The couple became another Tahoe mystery, mentioned occasionally in online forums, usually alongside speculation and half-formed theories, until a single detail resurfaced everything. It started with a call no one expected. In late summer, a land surveyor working near a dry, overgrown section of private woodland, several miles from the couple's last known route, noticed something unnatural in the ground. A shallow depression, hidden beneath dead brush and fallen pine needles, almost perfectly rectangular. Curious, he cleared away debris. What he saw next made him step back. At the bottom of a dry pit, nearly 5 feet deep, something red caught the sunlight. Not fabric, not plastic, metal. A bike frame. And as authorities would soon realize, it wasn't just any bike. It was the same red bike investigators had been searching for 5 years earlier. And that discovery would force everyone to ask the same terrifying question. If the bikes were here all along, where had Ethan and Maya really gone? The pit wasn't supposed to exist. That was the first thing investigators said when they arrived at the site. According to county land records, the area had been surveyed multiple times over the years. No construction. No recent excavation permits. No known sinkholes. Just dry woodland, sloping gently away from an old fire access road that hadn't been used in over a decade. Yet there it was. A narrow, almost perfectly vertical pit carved into the earth, measuring just over 4 feet deep, its walls hardened by time and weather. It wasn't wide, maybe 6 feet across at most, but it was deliberate. Clean. Too precise to be natural. At the bottom lay the red bike. Ethan and Maya's red bike. The frame was intact, partially buried under layers of dust, pine needles, and compacted soil. The chain was rusted, the tires long deflated, but the serial number was still readable. When investigators ran it, the match was immediate. There was no doubt. After 5 years of unanswered questions, one half of the couple had resurfaced, silent, immobile, waiting in the ground. Within hours, the area was locked down. Yellow tape cut through the forest like a warning scar. Word spread quickly through local law enforcement, then faster through the community. Retired search volunteers began calling the sheriff's office, stunned that the bike had been found so far from the original search zones. And that was when the first problem became impossible to ignore. This location had been searched before. Not directly, but close enough that someone should have seen something. During the initial weeks after the disappearance, search teams had focused heavily on trails, ravines, and water access points. This particular stretch of land sat just outside the high-priority zones, dismissed early because there was no logical reason for Ethan and Maya to be there. No mapped trail passed through it. No scenic overlook. No shortcut worth taking. Unless someone led them there. Or forced them. As forensic teams photographed the scene, another detail emerged. The red bike hadn't been thrown into the pit. It had been placed. The handlebars were turned slightly to the side, the frame resting upright against the dirt wall as if leaned there intentionally before soil and debris were added on top. This wasn't the chaotic result of an accident. It was careful, almost respectful. That realization shifted the tone of the investigation instantly. Deputies returned days later with excavation equipment. Layer by layer, they removed compacted dirt, documenting everything. About a foot below the bike, they found something else. A second bike. Black. Ethan's. Unlike the red bike, this one showed more damage. A bent wheel. Scratches along the frame. But it too was largely intact, and placed, not tossed. 2 bikes. 1 pit. No bodies. The absence was deafening. Search teams expanded outward, combing the surrounding forest with renewed urgency. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Ground-penetrating radar scanned nearby soil. Investigators hoped, feared, that they would uncover remains. They found nothing. No disturbed ground beyond the pit. No clothing. No personal items. It was as if the bikes had been separated from their owners deliberately, intentionally hidden away as artifacts rather than evidence. As the news broke, old tips resurfaced. A ranger remembered a vague report from years earlier, someone claiming they'd heard voices arguing near an unmarked road late one evening. The tip had gone nowhere at the time. Now it felt heavier. Another witness came forward, saying he'd seen a pickup truck parked near that same fire road on the day Ethan and Maya vanished. No plates remembered. No clear description. Just a feeling, he said, that it didn't belong there. Investigators re-interviewed everyone. Friends, family, locals, even people who had briefly crossed paths with the couple during that final week. Nothing concrete emerged, but a pattern began to form. Small, forgettable moments that now seemed threaded together by chance. Or by design. One question dominated every meeting. Why hide the bikes and not the bodies? Some theorized that the pit had been meant to conceal everything, but something had gone wrong. Others believed the bikes were planted later, long after the disappearance, as a way to mislead or taunt investigators. The soil analysis complicated things further. The layers suggested the pit had been refilled more than once, meaning someone had returned. More than once. 5 years after the disappearance, the case was officially reclassified, from missing persons to suspected foul play. The couple's families were notified before the announcement went public. Maya's mother reportedly collapsed when she heard about the bikes, not from relief, but from the crushing realization that someone had known where they were all along, and had chosen silence. As investigators traced land ownership, another unsettling fact surfaced. The woodland didn't belong to the county. It was privately owned. And the owner, a reclusive man who lived alone several miles away, had been questioned briefly during the original search, then dismissed. His name was back on the board now. But before deputies could reach him, another discovery threatened to change everything. Hidden beneath the bikes, pressed into the hardened dirt at the base of the pit, was a faint marking, almost erased by time. A symbol. Something carved deliberately into the soil before it was covered. And no one could agree on what it meant. The symbol at the bottom of the pit was easy to miss. It wasn't large. It wasn't dramatic. Just a shallow, uneven marking pressed into the hardened earth beneath the bikes, shaped like an intersecting set of lines, almost a crude arrow, or perhaps a distorted letter. Time had softened its edges, and years of pressure from soil and debris had nearly erased it altogether. But it was deliberate, and that was enough. For investigators, the symbol confirmed what many had already begun to suspect. The pit was not simply a place of disposal. It was a message, or a marker, something meant to be returned to, or remembered. That possibility narrowed the focus of the investigation sharply. Attention shifted back to the landowner. His name was Caleb Harlan, 56 years old at the time the bikes were discovered. He lived alone in a weather-beaten cabin not far from the fire road that led to the pit. Locals described him as quiet, private, and intensely territorial. He disliked hikers, despised bikers, complained often about trespassing, even when people remained on public land. 5 years earlier, during the initial search, Harlan had been questioned once. Briefly, he denied seeing anything unusual and refused consent for a full search of his property. With no probable cause and hundreds of acres to cover elsewhere, investigators had moved on. Now, that decision loomed large. Deputies returned to Harlan's cabin with a warrant. What they found wasn't enough to charge him, but it was enough to unsettle everyone involved. Inside the cabin were maps. Dozens of them. Old trail charts, forestry diagrams, hand-drawn sketches of terrain surrounding the lake. Many were marked with notes in the margins. Dates, weather conditions, times, and one map, folded and creased from frequent handling, showed a small circle drawn around the exact location of the pit. Harlan claimed he was a hobbyist, a tracker, someone who liked to understand the land. He said the circle marked a place where erosion had once concerned him. He denied knowing anything about the bikes, the pit, or the couple. But then came the phone records. 5 years earlier, on the night Ethan and Maya disappeared, Harlan's phone had connected briefly to a tower near the couple's last known location, far from his cabin. When confronted, he said he'd gone out to check his property lines after hearing noises. No one could verify that. Investigators pressed harder. They asked about his history, his movements, his grievances. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Over the years, Harlan had filed multiple complaints about bikers straying off designated trails. He'd been involved in a heated argument with a cyclist once, documented by a ranger, after accusing the man of damaging his land. Still, none of it was proof. The case teetered on the edge of collapse once again, until a former search volunteer came forward. Her name was Rachel Kim, and 5 years earlier, she'd participated in one of the earliest ground searches. At the time, she'd reported something strange, finding disturbed soil near an unmarked road. The area hadn't been prioritized, and her observation had been logged, then forgotten. When she heard about the pit, she recognized the location immediately. "I was there," she said. "I stood right above it." Back then, the pit had been hidden better, covered with fresh brush and pine needles, deliberately camouflaged. Rachel remembered feeling uneasy, but with no visible evidence and hundreds of acres to search, the team had moved on. That meant someone had known how search teams operated. Someone patient. Someone confident. Investigators revisited Harlan's property again, this time with cadaver dogs. The dogs showed interest near a shed behind the cabin, but no remains were found. Ground scans came back inconclusive. Then came the anonymous tip. A call to the sheriff's office late one evening. The voice distorted, either by nerves or intention. The caller claimed to have seen Ethan and Maya arguing with a man near the fire road the day they vanished. A man matching Harlan's description. When asked why they hadn't come forward sooner, the caller paused. "He told me not to," the voice said. "Said bad things happen to people who don't respect the land." The call disconnected. Phone tracing led nowhere. Public pressure intensified. Media descended on Tahoe once more, framing the story as a long-buried crime finally clawing its way back into daylight. Online forums dissected every detail of Harlan's life. Protesters gathered near the sheriff's office demanding an arrest. But the truth remained just out of reach. No bodies. No weapon. No direct witness. And then, during a routine evidence review, a forensic analyst noticed something overlooked. Soil samples from the pit contained trace elements not native to that location. Minerals consistent with a different area, one several miles away, closer to the lake's eastern slope. Meaning the bikes hadn't just been hidden. They'd been moved. The implication was chilling. Wherever Ethan and Maya had encountered their fate, it wasn't where the bikes were found. Someone had transported them. Someone with time, strength, and familiarity with the terrain. As investigators prepared to search the new area indicated by the soil analysis, a storm rolled in, sudden and violent, closing off access roads and delaying the operation by days. Days that someone else could use to disappear. Because when deputies returned to Harlan's cabin after the storm passed, the door was open. The maps were gone. And Caleb Harlan was nowhere to be found. Caleb Harlan's disappearance should have been the moment everything snapped into focus. It didn't. Instead, it introduced a final layer of uncertainty that investigators would never fully peel back. His cabin showed no signs of struggle. No forced entry. No hastily packed belongings. Just absence. The maps were gone. A few personal items remained. Enough to suggest he hadn't planned to vanish, but also enough to make it impossible to prove he hadn't. A statewide alert was issued. Roads were checked. Campsites searched. Nothing. For weeks, authorities debated the unthinkable possibility that the prime suspect in a reopened disappearance had disappeared himself. Meanwhile, the new search zone identified through soil analysis reopened old wounds. The area sat near a remote eastern slope of Lake Tahoe, a place less traveled, marked by uneven ground and long-abandoned service roads. Search teams returned with dogs, drones, and renewed urgency. On the third day, they found something. Not bodies. Evidence. A fragment of fabric tangled in brush, weathered, faded, but unmistakably synthetic. Forensic testing later confirmed it matched the material of Maya's riding jacket. Nearby, a broken watch face was recovered, the glass scratched, the hands frozen at 4:17 p.m. It was the closest anyone had come to the couple in 5 years. But even then, the land refused to give up its dead. Searches extended through the fall. Winter returned. Snow sealed the ground once more. With no remains recovered, the investigation stalled yet again, caught between suspicion and proof. Caleb Harlan was eventually declared a person of interest, then quietly removed from public bulletins due to lack of evidence. His name lingered in whispers, in online threads, in the uneasy space between accusation and certainty. Years later, the case remains open. Officially unresolved. Ethan Rowe and Maya Collins were never found. Their bikes, cleaned and catalogued, now sit in an evidence warehouse, silent witnesses to something that no one can fully explain. The pit where they were hidden has long since been filled, the forest reclaiming the scar as if nothing had ever happened there. But those who worked the case say the same thing. Someone knew. Someone planned. And someone walked away believing the land would erase what they'd done. It didn't. Because 5 years after 2 people vanished, a red bike in a dry pit forced the truth back into the light, and reminded everyone that some disappearances are not accidents. They are decisions. And the question that still haunts Lake Tahoe isn't what happened. It's who was patient enough to wait that long. 5 years passed before the bikes surfaced. That means for 5 years, someone knew exactly where they were. Someone knew the search teams were looking in the wrong places. Someone knew when to stay silent. Ethan and Maya didn't just disappear. They were removed. The question is, by who? Was it someone who watched from a distance? Someone who understood the land well enough to hide a truth in plain sight? Or is the real story buried somewhere the searches never reached? What do you believe happened that day near Lake Tahoe? Leave your theory below. Because whoever did this may never speak. But the silence they left behind is still answering questions. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss the next chilling mysteries we are about to uncover. Because the missing may be gone, but the questions are never truly silent.